Speaker today, Dr. Michael Lewis, is no stranger to this group. He has spoken here several times before, and his talks have always been entertaining and informative. In addition to having written several books, he's also an award-winning photographer who has traveled to all 7 continents. We're going to hear about those today, and whose images have been shown in numerous galleries and exhibitions. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Michael Lewis.
So thank you for inviting me back. I didn't tell this to Bob, but this is my 7th time here. And since all of our memories are not what they used to be, I've given the same talk every time, and nobody's noticed. And I think very fitting for this group is the famous Ray Meyer, who was the coach for the DePaul Blue Demons when he was in his 90s, said there were 3 stages in life: youth, adulthood, and you look good. So I'm looking out at this audience, I'm thinking, you look good. We're going to take a trip to all 7 continents and sort of peak travel experiences. And this was one of my most, for me, exciting images. This was taken approximately 30 years ago in Namibia, in the country of, in Africa, and it was a country in the middle of Africa. And this zebra was enjoying the grass in the afternoon sun, and this cattle egret got closer and closer and closer. And my heart almost jumped out of my chest because I thought this could really be an exciting image. But this was in the olden days of slide film. So I had to wait 3 weeks to know if it was out of focus or overexposed. But to me, this image sort of encapsulates the idea for me of photography that one world, and we're all connected. Peak experiences. This term was coined by my professor and mentor, Abraham Maslow. So what is a peak experience? Peak experiences are those transcendent moments of pure joy, wonder, awe, and elation. And that's what I'm hoping to share with you today. So many peak travel experiences. And I have, as Bob mentioned, written several books. This is a book of photographs from all 7 continents. It's a book of photographs of birds from all 7 continents. This is a photograph of 2 humpback whales off the coast of Antarctica. And this was a mother and daughter humpback that were cavorting in these waters for about an hour. A humpback whale is 50 feet long and weighs 35 tons. And after watching them, this peak moment was when mother and daughter did a deep dive together. And humpback whales, this is known as their tail fluke. Every tail fluke is different. It's like our fingerprints. So every humpback whale can be recognized by its tail fluke. But that was certainly a peak experience. This photograph was taken in Botswana, a country in Southern Africa. And as I raised my camera to take a picture of this beautiful sunrise, between the time of raising the camera up and clicking the camera, this giraffe that you can see in the far right appeared in the screen. So it's a good example of something that seemed to happen to me very frequently. just being in the right place at the right time. And as John Shaw says, every place in the world is magical if you're there at the right time. This is a photograph off the west coast of Ireland. This is on an Achill Island. And I was riding on a bus and I saw this double rainbow. And I yelled to the bus driver to stop the bus. I jumped out of the bus and I literally started jumping over hedges to get this picture so there wouldn't be a road. There would just be grass and hedges in the front. And was just thrilled at this image. And what I didn't know until somebody pointed out to me later is that the outer layer of the inner rainbow is the mirror image because it's the inner layer of the outer rainbow. So I thought that was quite fascinating. And as Ansel Adams, the famous photographer, said, it's joyful to be in places when God's ready for someone to click the shutter. This was another peak moment. These are stunningly beautiful scarlet ibises. And this was on the island of Trinidad. And this was late in the afternoon when they were on their way to their roosting spot at night. And there were several hundred of them. So that was certainly a peak travel experience. Many photographers are specialists. You know, they just take birds or animals or landscapes. But I love just being open to any possibility. Birds, people, landscapes, animals. And this was truly one of life's most thrilling experiences. This is Iguazu Falls, which is on the border between Argentina and Brazil. And it's the largest waterfall in the world. There are more than 200 individual waterfalls. And Eleanor Roosevelt, when she saw Iguazu Falls, famously said, poor Niagara. This was sort of a combination 2-day peak experience. This was in northern Spain, and this was a cave painting, and it was one of man, or we think maybe even women did a lot of the cave painting. Anyway, one of the great works of art from 30,000 years ago. And then the very next day, we were in Bilbao at the Guggenheim Museum seeing one of man's great artistic creations 30,000 years later. So the juxtaposition of the two was truly magical. So travel greatly expands our horizons. One learns about different cultures and the many ways in which we're connected. We learn new ways to relate to the world and to ourselves. And at the same time, Paul Thoreau, a famous travel writer, says, travel makes one modest. You see what a tiny place you occupy in the world. So this also was very much a peak experience. This is my friend Jeff Tabin, who is a professor of ophthalmology at Stanford. And my wife and I were in Ghana observing him perform cataract surgery. And Jeff Tabin has performed 100,000 cataract surgeries. So the way that I picture that is, think of a football stadium filled with blind people, and he's given sight to all of them. But even far more important than that is that he's not so interested in how many surgeries he does, but he teaches the local doctors how to perform the surgery. So this organization has now performed more than 1 million cataract surgeries at no charge to the, for many years it was called Himalayan Cataract Project, and now it's called Cure Blindness Project. So it's the most worthy cause in my mind, and it's just miraculous. So we're talking about peak experiences. This is a gentleman who was blind for years, and the next image was the very next day when the bandage came off and he could see perfectly. So that was really, truly one of life's peak experiences. And all of the profits from any of my books go to this organization. Now, so again, being open, one of the joys of travel, not just photography, but just travel, is being open to beauty and adventure, which happens around every corner. The next image is going to, I think, give you some strong evidence that there's a little problem with my IQ. This is a spitting cobra, and a spitting cobra gets its name because it can spit with accuracy from 10 feet away and blind you. It's temporary, but it's very painful. But even more important, its bite is fatal. There's no antivenom. So how did I get this picture? This was in the country of Namibia in Southern Africa. And our guide happened to be a snake handler, and he'd captured this spitting cobra near our cabin and was taking it out to release it in the wild. And he said that he thought that it had temporarily released its venom while he was, capturing it. So I was about 3 feet away when I took this picture. And fortunately, he was right. It had temporarily released its venom. People often ask, what's your most exciting trip? And in fact, every trip that we've been on has been exciting. And if I did have to give one answer, I would have to say a safari in Africa. However, another strong candidate would be isolated islands. And this image was taken on the Galapagos Island. And this is the famous Galapagos tortoise that weighs 500 pounds and I'm sure you know, this is where Darwin's theory of evolution started. And it's represented by this tortoise because on some islands, the carapace, the part just above the leading edge of its shell, on this particular island, the vegetation is very low, so it helps cut through the vegetation. But on another island where the vegetation is much higher, the carapace goes up so it can raise its neck higher. These are the well-named red-footed boobies, seabirds on the Galapagos. And this is a male frigate bird strutting his stuff to try to attract a female admirer. Another fascinating isolated island is the island of Madagascar. Madagascar is an island off the east coast of Africa, and it's reported that the island separated from the east coast approximately 80 million years ago, and it was estimated that approximately 60 million years ago, these lemurs Just there was some loose vegetation or logs, and they were on the logs and swept from Africa to Madagascar. And the result is that lemurs have filled all these niches that normally would be occupied also by gorillas and chimpanzees and bonobos and other large apes, which didn't make the trip. And lemurs are fascinating. There are many kinds. There are up to 100 kinds of lemurs. These are called ringtail lemurs, and they travel in packs. And the head of the pack is an alpha female. This is a white, black and white ruffed lemur. And in my books, I have a quotation that goes with each of the images, and putting the quotation together with each image was as much fun as taking the image. And the quotation that I put with this image was from the film Betty Day, I'd Love to Kiss You, but I just washed my hair. This is one of the beautiful children on the island of Madagascar. And the original inhabitants came both from Malaysia, from the Indonesian area, and from East Africa. And well, like children everywhere, they were just beautiful children. But I love the quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. We find such delight in the beauty and happiness of children that it makes the heart too big for the body. This is another fascinating isolated island. This is the island of the Falkland Islands. And the Falkland Islands is off the southern coast of South America. And what's one of the remarkable features of the island is that it's a British protectorate. And so here you are off the coast, southern coast of South America, and you think you're in Scotland in the 1950s. It's Victorian architecture and double-decker buses and the red post office, boxes. So that in itself is fascinating. And these are Magellanic penguins that are found on the Falkland Islands. And here's the quote that goes with this image. Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How about cooking something up with me? This is a black-browed albatross, and albatrosses are fascinating, remarkable creatures. They have a 10-foot wingspan and can glide without flapping their wings for 500 miles, just riding on the currents. Quite extraordinary. We now go to one of the most isolated places on Earth. This is South Georgia Island, which for many, many years was the whaling capital of the world. And this is where some of you may know about Shackleton, Ernest Shackleton, and his story. South Georgia Island is 2,500 miles east of the southern tip of Argentina and 2,500 miles north of Antarctica. And the only way to get there is by boat. So it's quite isolated. However, it's really worth the trip, because when you get there, you step off the boat onto a beach and you're greeted by 100,000 pairs of these king penguins. So it's truly a peak travel experience. So this is a sea lion on the island of on South Georgia Island, and given the sort of supercilious expression on his face, This was the quote that I put with this image from Oscar Wilde. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. Another fascinating island with its unique flora and fauna is Borneo. And these are orangutans that are endemic to Borneo. Orangutans are fascinating creatures. You can see their very long arms. They spend at least 90% of their time in trees. After the male mates with the female, he disappears, and the female for the next 8 years raises typically one baby on her own. This is from in Australia, and this is the koala, which is a fascinating in so many ways. Its diet is exclusively eucalyptus trees, as we see here. And I think the quote from Stephen Covey fits this creature, which is, the thing that makes you different, that's where your poetry is. So here's the promised safari that we talked about. Here's this beautiful lion, and I love this image. As some of you know, lions typically sleep during the day and hunt at night. So to get an image of the lions sort of awake and in the sunlight was I was very pleased with that. And this is a brother and sister lion. You don't often think of them as being so loving and affectionate. And I love the sort of curl of the tail. This is mother and daughter cheetah. And cheetahs are fascinating creatures. They are built in so many ways for speed. So for example, they are the only big cat whose claws are not retractable. In other words, their claws are always out to gain that 1 millisecond advantage to take off after game. Also, their heads are small and their bones are fairly light to make them more aerodynamic. And the dark line under the eye, our athletes, our football players and baseball players got that idea from the cheetah because the cheetahs, unlike lions, hunt during the day. So the line is to decrease the sunlight on their face. These are wild dogs, which are really interesting creatures. They always hunt in a pack. And again, it's an alpha female that's head of the pack. And an alpha female has all of the babies for the pack, and the other animals help take care of the litter. And wild dogs are the most successful hunters of all. They have an 85% success rate. And lions, for example, have approximately a 30% success rate. This to me is fascinating. This is an example of boys will be boys. These are two adolescent giraffes, and what's happening here is something called necking. And what happens is that one giraffe lines up next to the other and takes a swing with their neck against the other neck, and then they alternate. And one thing that's fascinating to me is that it was determined that giraffes are either right-necked or left-necked, which means that, they favor going one way or the other. And so in this case, the giraffe in front would be left-necked and line up parallel with the other giraffe, whereas if it was the other way around, the giraffe would line up the other way. And again, in the boys will be boys category, these are two adolescent polar bears. And this image was taken off in northern Manitoba in Canada, in a place called Churchill that goes right into the Henry Hudson Bay area. And the polar bears were hibernated until the beginning of November, when they come out and they're on land for 2 or 3 weeks, waiting for the ice floes to thicken so they can go out and be on the ice floes and hunt seals. So here they are practicing for their adventure on the ice. So sometimes when man and animals meet, sometimes man prevails. This is at a rodeo in Houston, Texas. However, sometimes the animal prevails. This is at a bullfight in Barcelona, Spain. And fortunately, this bullfighter got away unharmed because he very easily could have been killed. So, as I said before, many photographers are specialists. I am strictly an amateur, but I'm also a generalist. I'm open to all possibility, birds, and as we've seen, animals, people, landscapes. So I just wanted to show you some examples of birds. This was truly a peak experience. This was at a falconry center in England, and this ashy-faced owl was coming in for a landing, and typically the bird lands, but for some unexplainable reason, this ashy-faced owl took a look at me and said, "This is your lucky day." And so it gave me that shot. These are bald eagles, and all bald eagles are found in North America, and 90% of bald eagles are found in Alaska, and that's where this image was taken. Bald eagles mate for life, and don't they look like an old married couple? Love this image. These are roseate spoonbills, and their coloration comes from the crustaceans that they eat, the shrimp, and it's this carotenoids that gives them this coloration. It's the same with flamingos. That's how they get their coloration. These are two male wild turkeys. This was on Madagascar. And the quotation that I put with this is, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so at one of my photography exhibitions, I was absolutely shocked that 3 people bought this image. So truly, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So at least 99% of my images are totally spontaneous. So many people are hung up in equipment and, f-stops and lenses, and I just typically raise my camera and shoot. But this was a rare exception. This is a white-necked Jacobin, and this is on the island of Trinidad. a hummingbird, if you can imagine this, flaps its wings at 60 to 80 times a second. And so to capture a hummingbird, my camera was able to capture something at 1/8,000th of a second. That's not nearly good enough, so I had to get a special flash that stopped the action at 1/32nd thousandth of a second. So that was how I was able to get this particular image. Hummingbirds are just fascinating creatures. They can fly forward, backward, upside down, up and down, and typically make the rounds of their like 1,200 flowers a day in the same sequence. So we've seen animals and birds. I'll just show you 2 or 3 reptiles. This is a tree boa in Peru in the Amazon basin. And I love this image. This is a tree frog also in the Amazon area in Brazil, and a poison dart frog. This triggerfish was taken in Maui, and an irreverent friend of mine, when I showed him this image, said, when God created that creature, he must have been high on LSD. So I think this quote, which I love, fits so many of these images that were all notes in the same grand symphony. So we've looked at different animals and birds and reptiles, just a few images of people. This is a Coptic priest in Israel, a Hindu gentleman in India, and a woman of Mayan ancestry in southern Mexico. And I think the quote that goes with her and these other people is from Lauren Bacall: I think your whole life shows in your face, and you should be proud of that. So just a few images of children. This image was taken at least 30 years ago. This was the hill tribe, the Hmong hill tribe in northern Thailand. And this young girl looks like she has an old soul, and she's just sort of haunted me for the last 30 years. This is this beautiful young girl in Soweto, in a township in Johannesburg in South Africa, Dick Jalene's territory. And this little Irish gentleman looks like he's a handful. So a whole other area that is fascinating is that for several trips that we've taken, it's been a really interesting place historically. This was in China, and my wife and I were fortunate to be here in 1981. There were no skyscrapers in the country in 1981. The thousands of skyscrapers have all been built since then. And this was a town, small, over 1 million people. And no one could afford a printed newspaper, so they printed the newspaper and put it on a bulletin board. Also, this was a typical beauty parlor in China at the time. And this image, fortunately, is one that won't be seen again. this is a woman with bound feet. And bound feet were, this was made illegal in the early 1900s. And shockingly, appallingly, this practice went on for 1,000 years, where young girls' bones were broken at a young age, because this was thought to be attractive. This was fascinating historically. This is in Red Square in the former Soviet Union. And these are young pioneers, young members of the Communist Party. This was in 1984. No one, I don't think anyone on earth would have imagined that in 5 years, there wouldn't be the Soviet Union and there wouldn't be the Communist Party. This was in North Vietnam, and this image also haunts me. This gentleman must have fought in the Vietnam War, and there was absolutely no sense of hostility toward, we Americans. And several other people have reported the same experience. So I like the quote that goes with this. If you inquire what people are like here, I must answer the same as everywhere else. So just a few thoughts. Again, I'm strictly an amateur, but just a few things that have worked for me in taking pictures. And I do have some handouts there. I just have a few of these thoughts on photography. So if you're really interested, there are a few of those over there. So help yourself to any of the handouts. But one lesson I learned from DeWitt Jones, who's a famous National Geographic photographer, is that for most situations, there's more than one right answer. In other words, try to get closer or further away or higher up or lower down. So this was an example. These are the dunes in Namibia in Southern Africa, and these are the highest dunes in the world. And this image was taken at daybreak, where for literally not more than 3 minutes, my wife and I climbed the top of this dune to get this image of the sun coming at this angle. So that was one right answer. This was the same dunes taken from an airplane, and then the same dunes again taken from several hundred feet away. And this was a lake that had been, it's called Dead Lake, which had been dried up for several hundred years. So hopefully you would think you would agree that these are 3 right answers. So it's really important to think about different perspectives. Another thing that photography greatly has helped me with is increasing my powers of observation. We've all seen hundreds of thousands of flowers, but how often do we really look closely? And photography is one good way to help us to do that. This is an iris on the island of Maui. And again, if I hadn't taken this photograph, I would never have looked so closely, observed the beauty. This is one of my favorite quotes from Iris Murdoch. People from a planet without flowers would think we must be mad with joy the whole time to have such things about us, to not take things for granted. This is one of my favorite images, and it represents the idea of a photograph expressing an emotion. Technically, it's not a very good photograph at all. You see, it's very contrasty. There's shadows over the faces, but to me, it captures sort of the essence of old friends, and that I think, more important than getting all the technique right. This young boy in Iquitos near the Amazon in Peru, you can see the enormous pride in his parakeets. And these baby barn owls were as curious about me as I was about them. I also love images that that sort of express tranquility and have a meditative quality. This was in Roanji, which is a famous Zen garden in Kyoto, Japan. And this is in Mexico on Lake Pátzcuaro. And to me, this image sort of has a feeling of being frozen in time. These are fishermen using this ancient technique. Just love the feeling of that image. I also love images that ask questions. This is in a mosque in Morocco. You know, the question is, what's going on inside? Are we allowed in? And the answer is non-believers were not allowed in this mosque. I also love the idea of trying to just sort of, the way I think of it is capturing the poetry in the ordinary. This was in a market in Morocco, and this was just the man putting his shoes out for sale. But I sort of love the colors and the texture of this image. And again, the sort of poetry in the ordinary, these were autumn leaves that fell in a pond in our backyard. And if I'd spent hours, I never could have arranged them so elegantly. This image was taken in at a rehabilitation center in Cambodia. And my very good friend and mentor is Art Shea, who was a world famous photographer. And of any of my images, this was his favorite, because his idea was, you know, having a graphic image, an image that sort of knocked you off your, sort of literally knocked you off your feet. This represents, this was the horrible dictator Pol Pot killed 20% of his fellow Cambodians, and these were landmine victims. And so they were able to go to this rehab center where they helped construct their prostheses and learned to use them in 2 weeks' time. And the quote that goes with this is from Bob Dylan: "Be kind, because everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." So one doesn't have to travel to all 7 continents. You know, we all have treasures in our own backyard, either literally our own backyard or very near in the suburbs or in the city. These are the famous cicadas that were in our backyard. Some chipmunks and are enjoying the afternoon sun in our backyard. A white-tailed deer. And this was really quite exciting. This summer, I like to think that my wife and I had 5 new grandchildren. These were 5 Cooper's hawks that were born in our backyard. And these Cooper's hawks seen here are 1 week old. And then here's mother and one of the offspring at about 3 weeks. Interestingly, the mother in the her lower abdomen area developed something called a brood patch. And during the time of incubation, which lasts 5 weeks, she loses the feathers on her lower abdomen so that the warmth of her abdomen can incubate and be right on the eggs. Really a fascinating evolutionary device. Again, Cooper's hawks in our backyard. And I did feel like I was going on safari this past summer in my very own backyard. And it was astonishing to see how mature these Cooper's hawks got in like 7 weeks' time. And this summer in the Illinois Audubon magazine, I'm going to have a 2-page spread of eight images of the Cooper's hawks. So I love what poet Mary Oliver says. This is what I've tried to do with our travels. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Doctor. That was wonderful. Arnie will take questions from the auditorium. Then we'll see what we have from Zoom.
The picture of the roseate spoonbills,
Yes,
where was that taken?
that was in southern Texas. It was a place called High Island, just near, just north of Corpus Christi, south of, near the island of Galveston in Texas.
Okay. You see a lot of them on Sanibel Island also, in Florida. Thank you.
Yes.
First of all, thank you. It's an extraordinary program as usual.
Thank you.
Question regarding your relationship and taking photos of all these birds and animals and things. Did you ever have any, what is the word I'm looking for? An encounter where the specimen you're looking at walks towards you and becomes interested in you as opposed to the other way
Yeah, no,
around?
that's a very good question.
Thank you.
I'm glad that didn't apply to the spitting cobra. But I think the best example of that were the king penguins on the island of on South Georgia Island, because we were just another sort of clumsy, unattractive king penguin, I think, to them. They just sort of pretty much ignored it. They were curious, but not overly curious. But I think that was a really good example of that.
Doctor, we have a couple. Well, here's another question before we have some.
Michael, that was great. What camera do you use? You're still using an SLR?
The camera is a 20-year-old Nikon. It's a Nikon 500. By the way, the lady that just asked the question has traveled quite extensively and is a member of a famous organization, the Circumnavigators Club.
Couple questions. One, you have traveled so many areas. If you were to pick one, and it's like asking you to pick which is your favorite child, so it's a tough question. But what place would you like to go back to because you really could feel compelled to go back there? Well,
first of all, the favorite child is easy. It's the one that was nicest to me most recently.
Good answer.
But in fact, the serious answer is that we've just loved every single place. It's really hard to top a African safari. Until you've been in that situation, when you're in, instead of a zoo, you're in their environment instead of their being in your environment. And it's it's exhilarating. But every single place, as I've tried to suggest, has its own magic.
Last question, and it's one that triggered in my mind when I saw one of your slides that basically, I'm paraphrasing, but it basically said, we're one world, we're one people, we're one kind. Without making it a political question, America is so divided. But in your travels, have you seen a commonality, a basic humanity that exists? I know that our foods are different, our traits are different, and our looks are sometimes different. But what about the basic essence of people? How do you feel about that? And how might there be a message there for us here?
I actually have thought a lot about that question, and I think you're really on to something important. Every one of us, are interested in leading a fulfilling life and having our families and children thrive and be successful. And so our similarities are 1,000-fold outstrip our differences, and the different foods and different cultures and different religions. But another thing that I think of is that people sometimes ask, how do you how do you get these close-ups of strangers? And the way I think of it, I think is that photography has similarities to medicine in that if I'm taking a picture of someone or if I'm treating a patient, I'm trying to make them as comfortable as possible and creating a comfortable environment. So I would never go up and just jam a camera in someone's face. I try to engage them and to make them feel comfortable. And what's interesting is that approximately 90% of people are very happy to have their picture taken. But the image of the man in North Vietnam, I think, speaks to your question about how we're all connected. In a previous talk in the book Getting Wiser, which is here and available, I asked 101 people, what's one life lesson you'd pass on to the next generation? One of the people is Thomas Kirk, who was in the famous Hanoi Hilton prison for 6 years. He was tortured. He was in solitary confinement. And when I asked him, did he ever forgive his captors? He said, I forgave them instantly because I was fighting for a cause I believed in. They were fighting for a cause they believed in. So a lot of it is your own attitude and how you respond. But my guess overall answer to that is I'm overwhelmed by the commonality of not only just people, but the animals, how it's all one world.
Good answer. Thank you, Doctor. Let's see if there's anyone else that has a question.
Doctor, this is just of interest. Did your wife go with you on all of these trips?
Go where, sorry?
Did your wife go with you on all of these trips?
Well, my wife did go with me, and some of you may have been here 2 weeks ago
Yeah,
when
that's
she
why I
gave
asked.
one of her talks.
Okay.
And so yes, she did travel
Okay.
with me on all these.
Okay, the next question is, now with that Nikon that you used, did you carry with you a telephoto lens and a wide angle lens? Did you carry those things with you?
Well, yes and no. Yes, my wife came along on all those trips so that she could carry the equipment.
That was the answer I was looking for.
But I just want to expand on that question. When I was stationed in the Air Force in England, and I met my wife who was British and was living in England at the time. And I said, "Tell me about yourself." And she said, "Well, I was in the British equivalent of the Peace Corps in Ghana, and then I hitchhiked across northern Africa," and she gave a talk on that talk. Then I lived in Argentina for 2 years, and she gave a talk here on that experience. And then I crossed Russia, or crossed the Pacific on a cargo boat and hitchhiked around Japan, and then crossed Russia on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. So I said, "Oh, that's very interesting. Will you marry me?" And she said, "I guess so. I've had an exciting life. I'm ready for boredom." So that's a more complete answer to your question.
Michael, Michael, thank you so much. I think North Shore Senior Center might want to designate this guy a treasure, and his wife as well. The fact that he's spoken here 7 times, it makes my job and the job of the program committee much easier. So thank you again. It was
Thank you very much.
fabulous.